Hey guys, welcome to ETeeski Tutorials, and this is MORZ 3, or the Making of Robot Zombies, Episode 3. And no, I have not been wearing the same clothes for the past 2 weeks. I have just not filmed my progress as much as I should have, mainly because of the microphone being broken, but also partly because of laziness. But anyways, yes, I'm just filming 2 episodes back to back. So, this episode, I want to talk about level design, or level design prototyping more specifically, because I haven't created the actual level yet. So far, I have just created just prototypes until I have gotten to a point where I know what strategy I want to take to create the entire level. So the main thing that I've kept in mind is that I really want things to be speedy, and I just want to get this done quickly. I don't want to spend a bunch of time creating individual models for all of these different parts and texturing and UV mapping everything. So I wanted to create a process that was very, very quick and straightforward, yet flexible enough to create what I wanted to create. So I went through a couple of different stages, and I'll show you each of them. So first of all, I went through the stage where I just put everything inside of a room, and this room was just a long flat cube that was the floor, and then cubes that were the walls, and then a cube that was the ceiling, and then all of the objects just thrown inside of there. And that was it. Next, I needed to create a prototype level that could come up with a technique in which I would use to create the real level. And at first, I started off with physical tiles. Now, what I mean by physical tiles, I don't know if physical tiles is really the right word, but what I mean by that is I wasn't just tiling the texture, which I was, but I was also tiling cubes, basically. So I would create them all within inside of a certain size, like say 15 by 15, I believe it was one of the sizes that I chose. And then I would have the snap settings in Unity. So when I hold down Control, I would set it to 15 so that when I hold down Control, I can just drag and drop the objects a certain distance, and then they would line up perfectly. Now this kind of worked. It did create a ton of extra game objects inside of my scene, which for the most part I haven't gotten any lagging issues yet. So that seemed okay. It seemed to be working. I've had in past projects, I've tried using like 1,000 cubes as level design. Don't do that. It slows down your game a bunch. Do it as minimally as possible. But anyways, so I started off with this, and it seemed to work really well, and it seemed to actually be able to create a pretty dynamic looking level. There was some parts that were kind of jankety, where there's like cubes overlapping each other, but I thought it looked more like an old building that was just like modified from its original construction or something like that. And I thought it looked okay, and I actually thought it looked pretty interesting that way. The way I had not everything lined up perfectly, like I had some things lined up perfectly and some things that weren't. And it looked kind of ghetto rig, but it looked physically ghetto rigged, as if people actually built it in a ghetto rigged way. So I was okay with that. But the main problem with this whole system was that it was like, it turned out to be interior only, because the way it worked was I would line up the cubes, and the problem was corners. When I had 2 cubes, most of the time they would never line up corner to corner perfectly. They would always crisscross each other out like that. So that meant that the outside of my level had very ugly cubes jutting out of them, and it just didn't look right. And it looked very like a very amateur video game. And I really didn't want that. I wanted to create something that really looked semi-professional. But so I decided that technique wasn't going to work, because I really, really wanted to have both an exterior and interior level, not just an interior level. I was starting to experiment with the idea of making the game fully interior, because it did look very cool. I felt like it was very underground, and it did have a really cool look to it. But I really wanted to get that exterior as well as the interior, and I decided to start from scratch and create a new technique. So the next technique that I attempted was to create an actual model of the entire level. So I drew up a map, and oh, it's not sitting on the desk, it's somewhere else. But, anyways, I drew up a very rough sketch of a small map that I wanted to create. So I created this in Wings 3D. Um, and basically, what I did was I select every face, and then I selected every line that was attached to every face. So basically, I selected every line, I cut all those lines. So basically, now I have a million polygons as a UV map, and I just have them spread out evenly over the UV map. And I then proceeded to create multiple materials on one game object inside of Wings 3D. And at first, I just used bright colors, like the floor was red, the walls were blue, the ceiling was orange, stuff like that. And then once I actually got into Unity, then I replaced those with the actual materials that I wanted, and then I tiled them accordingly. And I found that this way was actually pretty quick, and I think that this is definitely going to be the way that I'm going to do the level design in the final product. So I think you can see it going on behind me. Oh, I also have a skybox, which I'm very proud of. I created that skybox, and I really like the way it turned out. And I was also able to make it spin. I have a very exaggerated spin on the screen right now, as you can see. But yes, so I created all of that, and yeah, why don't I just go into screen recording and actually show you how it looks. Alright, so I showed you guys this in my previous episode, MORZ 2, and this is just the room that I had absolutely no intention of level design. I just wanted to throw everything in here and scale it and make everything generally look the way I wanted it to. And then I actually started doing some level design. So why don't I show you my first attempt? And I'm just going to fly. Here it goes. Is this it? Oh, it is. But this needs to be turned off. There we go. So I'm going to go right here and find my player and Command Alt F, and now let's give that a run. So this level, if you can call it that, it's pretty small, but this was my first attempt at creating a level. And this is where I was talking about the physical tiles. Like, I believe that right there is one tile of brick, and that right there is one tile of brick, and so is that, and so is that. So they all seamlessly line up. Like, I can't even tell where one starts and where one ends because the snap settings snap them perfectly together, and it's completely seamless. You can't see where one starts and where one ends. Where there are some areas, like right there, you can see the seam, where I wasn't able to get it to snap the way I wanted, but I got it really, really close. So there's a little bit of a jittery effect where the textures are overlaying, but if you're not paying attention, it's not very noticeable. What else do I have to show? You can see the corners, because these are the Unity cubes and not like something I made inside of Wings. You can see the corners have really, really scrunched down textures because these are all flat cubes. So it's taking this whole image here and compressing it into that tiny area like that. So it's not the biggest end of the world. Like, most people, I showed this to a couple of my friends, and none of them seemed to notice this. So I didn't think it was that big of a deal. What else do I have to show about this? One weird thing is that I have like street lamps inside. So that didn't make a lot of sense. And then I also had a lot of models like my barbed wire fence. I didn't get a chance to use because it doesn't really make a lot of sense to use barbed wire fence inside. I have randomly a book sitting on a barrel. That makes sense. I don't know. Let's walk up these stairs. One thing I learned about my engine is that it's really not great at parkour. You pretty much want to do your level design where you are sticking on the ground at all times, and if there isn't any parkour, it just drops. Like I found out I can walk onto these vents, and I can like duck under here. Whoops. See, as you can see, it's not the greatest parkour engine, so you pretty much want to avoid almost all parkour when it comes to this engine. This wood, I would definitely have eventually replaced it because that just doesn't match. And then here is the futuristic office room. Um, yep, and there's nothing on the computer screen. I really want to eventually put something cool on the computer screen. But yeah, that's the futuristic office. And let me drop down here and go into this room. And here is the laboratory, I guess. I don't really know what kind of I guess this is like a generator room or something. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole, this level, the test level, the first test. Um, but yeah, that is pretty much it. So once I got to this point, I was really trying to figure out how I could redo everything. Because my original plan was to create, I wanted this to be a science lab facility. Whereas now I'm thinking more along the lines of like a science lab slash office, because a lot of my models kind of just match an office more. So I'm going to have it be a mix of being outside in this sort of kind of area and going indoors to a futuristic office setting. So I had to change my original plans just a little bit. To match what, like, because I didn't want to start over or create a whole bunch of new models to create a vision that I had that wasn't really that, great of a vision. It was kind of more like a knockoff of Half-Life 1 or something like that. Um, so I decided to just go with what I already had in place and just create from that. So now let me show you my next test level, which I believe I gotta fly over here. This is gonna take a long time to fly. Oh, no, I'm almost there. Alright, sweet. And I think I can just look at my player capsule. Yes. Now this is a test level that I'm actually really proud of. So this one I actually did model. And as you can see, now that the sky is open, you can see the sky. And if we just stand there for a few seconds, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the screen recording, but the sky is actually moving, just extremely slowly. So I wanted it to be an effect where if you weren't paying attention, you probably wouldn't notice. But if you just stop and you like walk away from your computer and you're just like zoning out and staring at it or something, you'll notice that the sky is moving, and I think it makes the level feel more like alive and real. And then I also have mountains. Whoa, crap. So this is the level that I spent a lot more time. I probably spent the most amount of time in this test level, making sure everything looks right in this. And I don't have the stairs going up ramps and the stairs going down ramps on this, so I'm ramping all over the place here. But yes, this is the kind of dynamic, or not dynamic, this is just like the level design that I really wanted, where you can go up to like high areas and you can just see the whole facility and really be able to admire it. And what else do I have to say? So here I got the barbed wire fences, which turned out to be probably one of my favorite models actually, because it was so simple to make. It was just I cut this part into a bunch of squares, so really the actual fence part is a long cube, and then I used transparent textures to make it see-through like that. And then you can shoot through them because I just didn't tag them as level parts, but you can't walk through them because the character capsule has a rigid body on it. And then I did the same thing for the barbed wire up there. It's just a long skinny cube that repeats, and I just made it a transparent texture. And I think that it looks really cool. It's one of my favorite models. What else do I have to show in this area? So yes, everything that isn't like this part wasn't in the level modeling. This is just one of the models that I threw in there. Same with the fence, the light, basically everything I showed you that was in that tiled room um, is stuff that I threw in here after I made it in Wings 3D. So in Wings 3D, I pretty much just did really simple low poly geometry and just came up with the level that I wanted, and then I selected faces and assigned materials to them. Like originally the walls were like bright blue, so everything that I wanted to be brick was like bright blue, and then everything that I wanted to be cement was like bright orange, and everything that I wanted to be this second cement was bright purple, and everything that I wanted to be the ceilings on the inside were bright green, and just so on and so forth. I had a separate one for the floors too. And then, oh, this indoor part, I forgot that I had this, but you can see that rock texture that I stole from Apple. Um, and I'm definitely not going to have that in the final version of the game, but I just wanted to test out what it would look like if I made the textures move while having a texture underneath it. So it has a what is this? I believe it's a reflection map, reflection specular, or something like that. And I just had the bump map. I just programmed it to move sideways, which was surprisingly simple to do, and it turns out to be a pretty cool effect. So I'm going to try to implement that into the final level. So after this, I will start modeling the final level. I need to write the actual written script of the dialogue so that I know exactly how to pace the real level. And then here is the sky sphere, or I'm really going to call it more of like a sky scene. And why don't I just exit and show you it. So first of all, we have to find it, because what I did was I threw it way off in the distance, and I think it's over here. Yes, there it is. So let's focus in on that a little bit more. And this should look familiar. This is the sky scene. So I just have a camera, and this camera is programmed to match all of the movements of the main camera and the gun camera. And then I have a sphere that I just turned, I modeled this sphere instead of using the Unity sphere. And I just created a sphere, turned the sphere inside out so that all of the faces are facing the opposite direction. That's why it's like hollow and you can only see the back side of it. So that's what I wanted, so that you could see the sky just like that. And then the mountains, I really didn't spend much time on. I just created a cube, and then I divided it into multiple squares, and then I raised all of the different vectors at just random heights. And then I applied a texture to it, which I can't remember what the texture is. Let's click on it and see if we can find the texture and figure out where it came from. I honestly don't even recognize it. Let's pull it up into Photoshop. I can't even remember where this texture came from. Oh, it was clouds. I actually copy and pasted the clouds texture of the sky sphere and just manipulated them until it looked like mountains. And it turned out pretty well. And then I also placed a point light right here to light the sky so that this side was brighter and this side was darker. But for the most part, I wanted the... Oh, wait, no, I think this is an unlit texture. Oh, never mind. Yeah, it's an unlit texture. So that means this texture ignores all lighting. So that is what I wanted, because I just wanted the texture to do all of the work as far as lighting goes. So that point light is what is lighting up the mountains, and I wanted to make it look like the mountains were being lit by this sunset looking thing. And this is a directional light to have the rest of the level. See how you can have like purple, a little bit of a purple glow to make it look like the level's really being lit by the sunset. But I wanted it to be dark enough that if you aren't pointing a flashlight at it or there isn't a light in the scene, it's like just very, very dark and you can just barely make out the details and the shadows. So I had to come up with the exact lighting that I wanted for that. So you can see that I have intensity very, very low. And in fact, I'll probably make it even lower in the final version, but we'll see. I'll just tweak everything. Let's take a look at this texture, because the texture itself ended up looking pretty cool. So let's open that up in Photoshop. There we go. So this is the texture, and I think that ended up looking really cool. So the way I did the UV mapping was a little bit different. The default sphere, the way it UV maps, is that it just cuts it in half and then takes a square texture and stretches that around the whole circle. Whereas I created my own sphere with its own UV map where it takes a circle out of the square texture, and that circle spans from here and goes all the way around to right about here. So in this area, there's actually quite a bit of distortion, but because it's all just stars, it's not very noticeable. And then this little circle right here is a lower resolution texture that I didn't think was as important. And I don't know if you'll be able to see. It's very subtle. This is lower resolution stars and higher resolution stars, but it's barely noticeable. You wouldn't notice that unless I pointed it out to you. So I thought that worked out pretty well. So let's go back to Photoshop so I can show you this texture. So I just have a bunch of layers. So I can edit the sky however I want at any time. And let's see if I can, I will duplicate this layer and I'll drag it all the way up to the top so I can show you the UV mapping. So this is what the UV map was. So this is the area where the sunset happens, and this whole circle stretches over the whole sphere until the opposite side where there's this tiny hole at the end. So this has a lot lower resolution and it's just stars. So yeah, I was really happy with the way that the sky sphere / sky scene turned out. Thought it was really cool. And it is the mountains. I'm not sure how I feel about the mountains. I think they work perfectly because you can't really notice that the mountains are part of an illusion as opposed to actually there in your scene. So you can only tell once you jump off and then you realize that, oh, this whole place was just floating in the air. And then once it gets out of my far clip plane, then I'm just flying. Like, you can't, I'm not actually moving, well, I am moving down, but I'm never going to get close to those mountains because they're an illusion. They're supposed to always be far away. So I think I'm going to leave it like that and just have it so that if you do jump off the edge and kill yourself, the screen will just fade to black or something like that before you get to that point where they really start looking fake. Let's see, is there anything else that I have to show off about this? I think that is pretty much it. Oh, also, one thing that I learned and that will definitely affect my final level design, I gotta make sure not to do that in the final level. But one thing I learned that was really fun is I found a lot of places where I could jump off and basically not really parkour, but like it feels like you're getting out of the level. There's a lot of places in my level design that do that. Like I know over here, let's see if I can pull this off. I can jump and parkour over to this. So there's a lot of opportunity to get out of the level and create like interesting situations like that where you think you're going out of the level, but really that's how I planned the player to go in the first place. So I'm definitely going to add that into the final level design and let this kind of happy accident be inspiration for the final level design. And I think there's some other cool parkour spots where you can like it really feels like you're getting out of the level. Like I know, was it right here? Yes, right here. I didn't plan this at all, but this could turn into something cool. Like maybe I can have an Easter egg, like right there it says something. So, you know, that sort of thing. And yeah, that is pretty much it. Oh, and then also my gun. I forgot to talk about my gun, even though it was in 2 MORZ episodes. So why don't I show you the startings of the pistol? So I'm still going to do a little bit of work on the pistol, but for the most part, this pistol is looking pretty good and I really like it. And it's made of 3 parts. So there is the slider, the handle, and you can't see it right now, but the magazine. And then I have the shaders set to self-illume bumped specular. And I have 3 textures for this. So I have the light map texture, the actual texture, and then the bump map. And what I found out about the pistol is that to some degree, yeah, I want to do a lot of work inside of the, here, I'll just drag and drop all of these into Photoshop so I can show you them. So let's see, is this the bump map? Yes, this is the bump map. Oh, that's the magazine. I dragged the wrong textures. Let's just do the slider. So, slider, slider, slider. Yes, okay. These are the ones I want to open up in Photoshop. So this is the bump map of the slider, and there's just areas where I made parts just a solid color to make them look very flat, and then there's parts where I made it noisy and bumpy so that you saw bumps in the pistol. And then here is pretty much the same thing, and I just added red lines everywhere, and then I just copy and pasted all those red lines into the illumination map. And the combination of these 3 textures creates this. So I found out that you really can't, I mean, I don't know, I'm not a professional modeler. This is kind of just, this turned out better than I thought it would. I'm pretty happy with how this pistol turned out, and I still have more work to do on it, just tweaking it. But yeah, as I found out, you really can't just rely on just one texture. Like this was 3 different textures that I had to modify and work together until the final product of all 3 of those textures came together and actually looked good. I think in the end, for this whole pistol, there's actually going to be 3 for the slider, 3 for the handle, and probably 2 for the magazine. So yeah, there's actually a lot of textures that go into this. So that's what, 8 textures in total just for the pistol. So I'm probably going to end up having like 8 or so textures for every weapon once I actually get all the weapons done. So I figured since the weapons are always going to be in the screen and right in your face, I wanted them to look good. So I'm adding a lot more textures for all the weapons. And then everything else, I have a lot more room to make smaller textures. Like, take for example this desk lamp right here. I don't think I can get away with a 512 texture on this, or even smaller, because it's a small game object, and you're really not going to get any closer than, say, this. And that looks fine. The bump map, actually, like this is actually at 8th resolution, because I wanted my computer to run faster for the screen recording. But you can see even with 8th resolution on all the textures, it still looks pretty good, and the bump maps really bring out a lot of detail. So that's one thing I really loved about this project, was messing with bump maps. Because in my other game, Galaxia Interface, I made it for the iPhone, and I didn't use any bump maps or any lighting. I just had just simple plain old textures and no lighting whatsoever because I wanted it to run fast on the iPhone. So this game has been really fun messing with all the bump maps and reflection maps and really messing around with all the different shaders and high resolution textures and photos and really trying to make it look realistic. So that has been really fun. So yeah, I think that's everything I have to show off right now. I don't think I really need to show off the bullets because I'm probably going to do a tutorial on how to make bullets like this. Um, and yeah, that's pretty much everything. So I guess until my next episode, I'll see you guys later and keep making games.